Right bracket Chapter 5. A History of Reincarnation. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. Rev. 12:9. Since reincarnation is one of the most accepted religious concepts in the world, it may be said that it is almost the religion of the whole world. And if the devil is deceiving the whole world, reincarnation must be a central part of his gospel, which is alive and well in every nation. One of the most difficult challenges to those believing in reincarnation is determining which version is correct. Since there is no primary source or original reference book such as the Bible or any other ancient record, the philosophy has just filtered down through many different peoples and nations. Interesting rituals are performed, ceremonies observed, and special days are allowed in the celebration of this rebirth. Some ancient Egyptians are said to have practiced embalming to prevent or delay rebirth into mortality again. The spirit which leaves the body at death has been represented in art by the Greeks as a butterfly, in Egypt as a hawk, a bird in Europe as a pigeon by the Lombards, and a wasp by the tribes of Assam. Right bracket Some religions believe it is possible for the spirit of one individual to enter into the body of another. The Pozo-Alphias of Celebes believe in three souls: the vital principle, the intellectual, and the divine element. Those who live wickedly, it has been said, will come back as insects or dung beetles. The Akikuyu women of East Africa, who wish to have children, will worship at the ficus tree, which is supposed to be inhabited with the souls of the dead. There are stories of trees and flowers that grow up from graves and are animated by spirits of the dead buried there. These spirits can even take up residence in fields of grain. Since there is no original reference book on reincarnation, it is difficult to gather information on its history. A multitude of sources has been used in collecting material for this chapter on the histories and traditions of nations and cultures embracing this belief, i.e., Egypt, India, Tibet, Greece, Rome, Islam's, Judaism, Christianity, and Theosophy. Each of these histories is discussed very briefly, with the suggestion that the reader consider the source of each and compare it with the restoration of gospel principles to Joseph Smith. Egypt. Very little information comes from Egypt concerning reincarnated beings, but one example is from the Book of the Dead. Nebseni, the Lord of Reverence, saith, I am yesterday, today and tomorrow, and I have the power to be born a second time. I am the divine hidden soul who created the gods, and who giveth sepulchral meals unto the denizens of Tuat, the underworld, Amentet, and heaven. Homage to thee, O governor of those who are in Amenti, who makest mortals to be born again, who renewest thy youth. Quoted in Reincarnation, Eva Martin, page 29. Right bracket The Egyptians had very deep religious expressions, and their statues, paintings, funeral structures, and embalmed bodies indicated a solemn belief in a hereafter. India. The predominant believers in reincarnation are the Hindus of India. It is practically the national religion with few exceptions, yet it was not always so. The doctrine of the transmigration of souls is in India the presumption which underlies not only Buddhism and Jainism, but also the philosophical systems of the Brahmins and the whole of Hinduism. In the ancient Vedic period it had as yet no existence. At that time the Indian peoples were still filled with a keen delight in life, and the righteous man looked forward to eternal continuance of existence after death. They believed that good men ascended to heaven to the companionship of the gods, and there led a painless existence, free from all earthly imperfections, a happy life, which was usually depicted as an enjoyment of sensual pleasures, but was yet occasionally conceived in a high spiritual sense. This naive representation of the soul's fate after death experienced a real change when, suddenly and without any transitional stages that we can perceive, the Indian people were seized by the oppressive belief in transmigration, which holds it captive to the present day. Enk. Of Religion and Ethics 12:434. At the basis of the Indian conception of transmigration lies the immovable conviction that there is no unmerited happiness, and no unmerited misery, that each person shapes his own destiny. Hinduism has no formal organization, and its teachings are handed down from father to son, becoming the principal factors in his life. His religion is his whole life, permeating through everything he does and thinks. Christians would do right bracket well to take note of what devotion really means by studying the life and thought of the Hindu. Sir Munir Williams explained, religion is ever present to Hindu's mind. It colors all his ideas. It runs through every fiber of his being. It is the very alpha and omega of his whole earthly career. He is born religious, and dies religious. He is religious in his eating and drinking, in his sleeping and walking, in his dressing and undressing, in his rising up and sitting down, in his work and amusement. Nay, religion attends him in antenatal ceremonies long before his birth, and follows him in endless offering for the good of his soul long after death. Religious Life and Thought in India, Williams, page 6. The ancient book Bhagavad Gita is the basic philosophy of India for the believers of reincarnation. The historian Will Durant said it is the New Testament of India, revered next to the Vedas themselves, and used in the law courts, like our Bible or the Koran, for the administration of oaths. Wilhelm von Humboldt pronounced it the most beautiful, perhaps the only true philosophical song existing in any known tongue. Perhaps the deepest and loftiest thing the world has to show. Our Oriental Heritage, page 565. In the tradition of those believing in reincarnation, the author of the Bhagavad Gita didn't even leave his name attached to it, apparently because he desired no temporal honors or praise. Any attachment to such things of this world would be a sin, or deterrent to reaching his nirvana. We don't even know when it was written, probably a few centuries BC. But this is typical of the thought and feeling of the reincarnationist of India. The Hindu's conception of God is not very different from that of the apostate Christian religion, whose confusing view of the Creator is described as follows. The Vedas, or the ancient sacred books of the Hindus, distinctly set forth the doctrine of the infinite and eternal Supreme Being. Thus, according to the Vedas, there is one unknown, true being, all-present, all-powerful, the Creator, preserver and destroyer of the universe. This Supreme Being is not comprehensible by vision, or by any other organs of sense, nor can he be conceived by means of devotion or virtuous practices. He is not space, nor air, nor light, nor atoms, nor soul, nor nature. He is above all these, and the cause of them all. He has no feet, but extends everywhere, has no hands, but holds everything, has no eyes, yet sees all that is, has no ears, yet hears everything that passes. His existence had no cause. He is the smallest of the small and the greatest of the great, such is the doctrine of the Vedas in its purest and most abstract form, but the prevailing theology which runs through them is what is called pantheism, or that system which speaks of God as the soul of the universe, or as the universe itself, accordingly. The whole tone and language of the highest Hindu philosophy is pantheistic. All that exists is God. Whatever we smell, or taste, or see, or hear, or feel, is the Supreme Being. Seeing, say the Hindus, that God pervades and animates the whole universe, everything living or dead, may be considered a portion of the divine substance. In this way, whatever the eye looks on, or the mind can conceive, whether it be the sun in the heavens or the great river Ganges, or the crocodile on its banks, or the cow, or the fire kindled to cook food, or the Vedas, or a Brahmin, or a tree, or a serpent, all may be legitimately worshipped as a fragment, so to speak, of the divine spirit. Thus there may be many millions of gods to which Hindus think themselves entitled to pay divine honors. The number of Hindu gods is calculated at 330 million, 3 times the number of their worshippers. Taken from Chambers Information for the People reported in Mill. Star 1850, 12:109. Tibet. In Tibet, the reincarnated Dalai Lama, or ruler of their country, is supposed to be immediately born somewhere as soon as he dies. At his death, everyone seeks for a newborn baby to find the rebirth of their old great Lama, who had died, so that he can rule again. The following list shows the time intervals between his deaths and rebirths. Birth, death, 1391, 1475, 1758, 1805. 1475, 1543, 1805, 1816. 1543, 1589, 1819, 1837. 1589, 1617, 1837, 1855. 1617, 1682, 1856, 1874. 1683, 1706, 1876, 1933. 1708, 1758. Taken from Laymanism L. A. Waddell, page 233. In one instance it is claimed that in 1475 the Lama Ganden Truppa died but passed into the body of a young boy. Ancient Greece. Socrates, Pythagoras, and Plato were among the ancient Greeks who, it is said, believed in reincarnation. The great philosopher Socrates, 399 BC, referred to it as that ancient doctrine. Pythagoras, another Greek philosopher and mathematician, claimed he could remember his past lives, and said that he had been a Trojan warrior, a prophet burned to death, a peasant, the wife of a shopkeeper, and a Phoenician prostitute. Plato presented detailed accounts of reincarnation in his major works. He stated that gluttons and drunkards would probably become asses in future lives, violent people would be born again as wolves or hawks, and people who follow leaders blindly would come back again as ants or bees. Since it was such a popular belief at the time, Plato used reincarnation concepts in some of his stories and writings. The earliest Greek thinker with whom metempsychosis is connected is Pherecydes, but Pythagoras, who is said to have been his pupil, is its first famous philosophic exponent. Pythagoras probably made his reputation by bringing Orphic doctrine from northeastern Hellas to Magna Graecia. The importance of metempsychosis is due to Plato. In the eschatological myth which closes the Republic, he tells the story how the son of Arminius, miraculously returned to life on the 12th day after death, and recounted the secrets of the other world. There are theories to the same effect in other dialogues, the Phaedrus, Meno, Phaedo, Timaeus and Laws. In Plato's view the number of souls was fixed, birth therefore is never the creation of a soul, but only a transmigration from one body to another. Plato's acceptance of the doctrine is characteristic of his sympathy with popular beliefs and desire to incorporate them in a purified form into his system. Aristotle, a far less emotional and sympathetic mind, has a doctrine of immortality totally inconsistent with it. In later Greek literature the doctrine appears from time to time. It is mentioned in a fragment of Menander, the inspired woman, and satirized by Lucian. Enck. Britannica, 1985 ed. 1533. It is difficult to determine if the Greeks borrowed this belief from some of the Egyptians or from India. The Orphic doctrine claimed that the soul and body are separated at death to be taken on the wheel of birth, to again be born somewhere else. Orpheus declared that the purer the life, the higher would be the next appearance on earth. These teachings appeared about the 6th century BC. The early Romans. The Roman view of reincarnation was probably inherited from the Greeks, just as many other things were, since those two ancient civilizations had many things in common. When Jesus was brought up before Herod, the Roman ruler, he encountered this doctrine. Whatever fear Herod had once felt regarding Jesus, whom he had superstitiously thought to be the reincarnation of his murdered victim, John the Baptist, was replaced by amused interest when he saw the far-famed prophet of Galilee in bonds before him, attended by Roman guard and accompanied by ecclesiastical officials. Herod began to question the prisoner, but Jesus remained silent. The chief priests and scribes vehemently voiced their accusations, but not a word was uttered by the Lord. Herod is the only character in history to whom Jesus is known to have applied a personal epithet of contempt. Go ye and tell that fox. He once said to certain Pharisees who had come to him with the story that Herod intended to kill him. As far as we know, Herod is further distinguished as the only being who saw Christ face to face and spoke to him, yet never heard his voice. For penitent sinners, weeping women, prattling children, for the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the rabbis, for the perjured high priest and his obsequious and insolent underling, and for Pilate the pagan, Christ had words of comfort or instruction, of warning or rebuke, of protest or denunciation. Yet for Herod the fox, he had but disdainful and kingly silence. Thoroughly piqued, Herod turned from insulting questions to acts of malignant derision. He and his men at arms made sport of the suffering Christ, set him at naught, and mocked him. Then in travesty, they arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate. Herod had found nothing in Jesus to warrant condemnation. Jesus, the Christ, Talmage, page 636. The Roman view of reincarnation is evident in Herod's belief that Jesus could have been John the Baptist, whom he had ordered to be killed. The New Testament records. Now Herod was perplexed, because that it was said of some, that John had risen from the dead, and of some, that Elias had appeared, and of others, that one of the old prophets was risen again. Luke 9:7, 8. Many Roman stories, songs, and poems depict their belief in being reborn on earth. Islam's. Only a few writings of the Islamic religion indicate that reincarnation had any support among these people. The reincarnationists point to the Quran, the Bible of the Islams, where it is written, "And you were dead, and he brought you back to life. And he shall cause you to die, and in the end shall gather you unto himself." Surah 2:28. They shall say, Our Lord, twice didst thou make us subject to death, and twice hast thou given us life, so we do confess our faults. Is there then a way to get out? How is it that ye believe not in God? Since ye were dead, and he gave you life, he will hereafter cause you to die, and will again restore you to life, then shall ye return unto him. The Koran. The body to the tomb and the spirit to the womb. The soul of the lower beast goeth to the body of the higher, and the soul of the high beast to the body of the savage, and the soul of the savage to the man. I tell you, of a truth, that the spirits which now have affinity shall be kindred together, although they all meet in new persons and names. The New Koran. The main segment of the Islam religion that believes in reincarnation is called the Sufis. Islam, which arose some 6 centuries after Christ, is derived largely from biblical thought and history. As a result, the orthodox mainstream of Islam has disavowed reincarnation, adhering to the Judeo-Christian concept of resurrection. However, the mystical wing of Islam, the Sufis, who incorporate considerable Oriental teaching and practice into their Muslim faith, have been believers in reincarnation since their inception. Reincarnation, Mark Albrecht, page 30. A Sufi poet, D. Din Rumi, wrote, I died as a mineral and became a plant. I died as a plant and rose to animal. I died as animal and I was man. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? Quoted in Poet and Mystic R. A. Nicholson, page 103. Judaism. There is no original concept or writing on the topics of transmigration or metempsychosis in early Jewish records. Attempts have been made with little success to find metempsychosis in early Jewish literature, but there are traces of it in Philo, and it is definitely adopted in the Kabbalah. Enck, Brit. 1533. This doctrine was foreign to Judaism until about the 8th century, when, under the influence of the Mohammedan mystics, it was adopted by the Karaites and other Jewish dissenters. It is first mentioned in Jewish literature by Saadia, who protested against this belief, which at his time was shared by the Eugenites, or whomsoever he contemptuously designated as so-called Jews. Although raised by the Kabbalah to the rank of a dogma, the doctrine of metempsychosis still found great opposition among the leaders of Judaism in the 14th and 15th centuries. Jewish Encyclopedia 12:231. The Kabbalah, according to Charles Ponce, was not an established system of principles. The Kabbalistic tradition is not a unified system of thought or a fixed theology with hard and fast theorems. There are certain basic ideas to be found in Kabbalistic speculation, but on the whole each mystic approached the material at hand from a different avenue, adding something here, subtracting something there. Kabbalah, Charles Ponce, page 127. The term Kabbalah translates into tradition, but more specifically it is a book of mysticism, theory and commentary. Another source of these symbols, letters, astrological and even the physical descriptions of people, came from the famous Sefer Zohar or Book of Splendor. It is a commentary on the first 5 books of Moses, as well as commenting on many other ideologies. Some of the chapter titles are The Palaces of Light, The Discourse of the Child, The Academy Head, Mysteries of the Torah, Small Additional Pieces, Commentary on the Song of Solomon, Secrets of Letters, The Mystical Midrash, The Faithful Shepherd and others. In a section called Discourse of the Old Man, an old donkey driver discusses the doctrine of metempsychosis with the rabbi. This book is described as a pseudepigraphic work which pretends to be a revelation from God. Under the form of a commentary on the Pentateuch, written partly in Aramaic and partly in Hebrew, it first appeared in Spain in the 13th century. Jewish Encyclopedia 12:689. It was also said that it propagated many superstitious beliefs, and produced a host of mystical dreamers and produced a strong tendency to substitute a mystic Judaism for the rabbinical. Ibid. 12:693. It was not until the writing of the Zohar in Spain sometime between 1280 and 1290 that the two branches of Kabbalism, the practical and the speculative, became united. When people speak today of the Kabbalah, they generally have this work in mind. Thus, the increasing popularity of the Kabbalah had a great deal to do with a greater acceptance of the reincarnation concept. The doctrine of reincarnation or metempsychosis counted so few adherents among the Jews that, with the exception of Abraham ibn Daud, no Jewish philosopher until Hasdai Crescas even deemed it necessary to refute it. Only with the spread of the Kabbalah did it begin to take root in Judaism, and then it gained believers even among men who were little inclined toward mysticism. Jewish Enk. 12:232. The Kabbalists quickly took up the idea of pre-existence and included it in their theory of transmigration or reincarnation. Kabbalah, Ponce, page 201. Christianity. As with Judaism, the ideology of the transmigration of souls was not taught in early Christianity either. Origen was the first of the great philosophers and intellectuals who came from within the Christian faith to teach these ideas as truth. This famous Christian father was a convert in the 3rd century and was a Stoic, a Neo-Pythagorean, a Platonist, and a Gnostic, yet he chose to be a Christian as well. Origen's influence was tremendous, and his writings were in the hundreds. Will Durant described his philosophic bent. Like Plotinus Origen had studied under Ammonius Saccas, and sometimes it is hard to distinguish his philosophy from theirs. God, in Origen, is not Yahweh, he is the first principle of all things. Christ is not the human figure described in the New Testament, he is the Logos or reason who organizes the world, as such he was created by God the Father, and is subordinate to him. In Origen, as in Plotinus the soul passes through a succession of stages and embodiments before entering the body, and after death, it will pass through a like succession before arriving at God. Even the purest souls will suffer for a while in purgatory, but in the end all souls will be saved. After the final conflagration there will be another world with its long history, and then another, and another. Each will improve on the preceding, and the whole vast sequence will slowly work out the design of God. Story of Civilization, Durant, 3:614-15. Origen was one of the most intellectual biblical scholars, yet strangely enough, he wrote, by some inclination toward evil, certain souls come into bodies, first of men, then through their association with irrational passions, after the allotted span of human life, they are changed into beasts, from which they sink to the level of plants. From this condition they rise again through the same stages, and are restored to their heavenly place. See De Principis, Book 3, Chap. 5. Origen also discussed this in his book Contra Celsum. Gradually through the centuries there were few others who toyed with the idea of reincarnation. The noted Saint Augustine, 354-430 AD, Bishop of Hippo, also pondered on the subject, and in his book, Confessions of Saint Augustine, asked the question, did my infancy succeed another age of mine that died before it? But he concluded that he had no one to tell him, not even mine own memory. He, like many others, could not find answers from the scriptures. For a quick Christian historical review of this philosophy during this period of time, let's go to an encyclopedic synopsis. Within the Christian Church reincarnation was held during the 1st centuries by isolated Gnostic sects, and by the Manichaeans in the 4th and 5th centuries, but it was invariably repudiated by Orthodox theologians. In the Middle Ages these traditions were continued by the numerous sects known collectively as Cathari. At the Renaissance we find the doctrine in Giordano Bruno, and in the 17th century in the Theosophist van Helmont. A modified form of it was adopted by Swedenborg. During the classical period of German literature, metempsychosis attracted much attention. Goethe played with the idea, and it was taken up more seriously by Lessing, who borrowed it from Charles Bonnet, and by Herder. It has been mentioned with respect by Hume and by Schopenhauer. Enck. Brit. 1985 ed. 1533. There is very little to be drawn from the Bible that supports the idea of being born into mortality many times. Mark Albrecht stated, many people insist that the Bible teaches reincarnation, citing a number of obscure verses, always out of context, and buttressed by explanatory comments which have highly dubious exegetical roots. Reincarnation, a Christian Appraisal, Albrecht, page 36. Supporters claim that they can prove reincarnation from the New Testament, citing Matthew 11:14 and 16:13-14 and Luke 9:18-19 as evidence. And if you will receive it, this is Elias, which was for to come. Matt. 11:14. He, Jesus, asked his disciples, saying, whom do men say that I the Son of Man am? And they said, some say that thou art John the Baptist, some, Elias, and others, Jeremias, or one of the prophets. Matt. 16:13-14. And he asked them, saying, whom say the people that I am? They answering said, John the Baptist, but some say, Elias, and others say, that one of the old prophets is risen again. Luke 9:18-19. One reincarnationist uses the following reasoning to explain these scriptures. There are many passages in the Bible itself indicating that Christ and his followers were aware of the principle of reincarnation. Once, the disciples of Jesus asked him about the Old Testament prophecy that Elias would reappear on earth. In the Gospel of St. Matthew we read, and Jesus answered them, Elias shall truly first come, and restore all things. But I say unto you, that Elias is come already, and they knew him not. Then the disciples understood that he spake unto them of John the Baptist. In other words, Jesus declared that John the Baptist, who was beheaded by Herod, was a reincarnation of the prophet Elias. Again speaking of John the Baptist, Jesus said, This is Elias, which was for to come. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Coming back, op. Cit. Page 4. The fact that some of the people thought Jesus was John the Baptist, Elias, Jeremias, or one of the prophets, does indicate that they thought Jesus could have been a reincarnated person. Since this was a common belief among the Romans, they could have applied it to the Savior. That was what Herod believed and had said. However, Peter came up with the correct identity, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God, which shows that Jesus was not a reincarnation of one of the prophets. Here was an excellent opportunity for Christ to have said something in support of mortal rebirth, but nowhere did he give any credence to it. A further clarifying explanation is found in the Mormon reference book, the Compendium, by Richards and Little. John the Baptist was an Elias, or forerunner, for that is what the name or title Elias means, as he came to prepare the way before the Lord. In the same sense Joseph Smith was also an Elias, because he came to prepare the way before the Lord preceding his second coming. The office of John was that of an Elias, and therefore the Lord referred to him as such. Page 281. Another quotation used by the teachers of reincarnation pertains to the blind man. And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man, or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. John 9:1-3. The man, they infer, could have sinned before he was born. Jesus answered by saying only that the works of God could be manifest in his healing. This would have been another opportune time for Jesus to talk about reincarnation, but he never gave it a sentence of substantiation. The question does imply, however, the disciples' belief in the doctrine of a pre-mortal life. Still another passage which has often been quoted by those who believe we must be born again into mortality comes from John 3:1-13, a portion of which reads, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. 3:3. Jesus then clarified what type of birth this was, not born again of woman, but rather born of water and of the Spirit, so he could enter into the kingdom of God. v5, he continued with, That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I said unto thee, Ye must be born again. Verses 6-7, it is very clear that Jesus was talking about a water baptism and a spiritual confirmation, not a physical or mortal rebirth. The prophet Joseph explained, Being born again comes by the Spirit of God through ordinances. DHC 3:392. Continuing on with the history of this philosophy among the Christians, there is evidence that some sort of belief in reincarnation existed among the Druids of Western Europe. Also, from ancient Irish records, there are stories of the rebirths of some of their heroes. The Far East has generally supported a belief in reincarnation for many centuries, much more so than in American and European nations, where its popularity growth is more recent. The blending of Christianity with a modern transmigration philosophy is becoming more and more accepted in these Western countries. For example, Rev. W.R. Alger, a Unitarian clergyman, published a book in 1860 entitled A Critical History of the Doctrine of a Future Life. In it he advocates that when the soul leaves the body, it is born anew in another body, its rank, character, circumstances, and experience in each successive existence, depending on its qualities, deeds, and attainments in its preceding lives. Page 475. This same principle has also been accepted by other modern philosophers such as Hume, Kant, Schopenhauer, Reinalvia, and MacTaggart. Theosophical groups. The 7 organizations discussed in this section fall under the general classification of being theosophical, supporting any of various philosophies or religious systems that propose to establish direct mystical contact with divine principle through contemplation, revelation, etc. Webster's New World Dictionary, 1982. Beginning with larger, more well-known groups, we will briefly discuss 1. Madame Blavatsky, 2. Church Universal and Triumphant, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, 3. The Rosicrucians, 4. Alice Bailey and the New Moon, 5. Guy Bellardsheim Order, 6. The Joy Foundation Incorporated, and 7. Morningland Church of the Ascended Christ. 1. Madame Blavatsky. The theory of multiple births did not gain much of a foothold in the Christian nations until the appearance of the writings and teachings of Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, 1831–1891. Helena was born in Russia in 1831 in an aristocratic family and became interested in the occult and mediumistic influences at a very early age. She was recognized as one of the most influential writers of the whole psychic/occult world and wrote 2 major books, Isis Unveiled in 1877 and The Secret Doctrine in 1888. In 1875 she founded the Theosophical Society with Henry Steele Olcott. One author, Susie Smith, paid her this tribute. It is one dynamic woman, Madame Helena P. Blavatsky, who is responsible for bringing the theory of reincarnation into common knowledge in the West. In fact, occultism, as we know it today, owes everything to her. One of the most controversial figures in history, Madame Blavatsky was either a saint or a devil, depending upon whose version of her life and times you read. Probably the real woman was a combination of the two, and certainly the more interesting because she wasn't lily white. Huge, earthy, dirty, sloppy chain-smoking cigarettes which she rolled herself, and not above using hashish and opium, this clever and captivating adventuress, a psychic of proved ability, had so much vitality and such great personal magnetism that she challenged the interest and commanded the loyalty of many of the intellectuals of the last century. Reincarnation for the Millions, Smith, page 44. In her early writings she rejected the idea of being born again and again, but later she became converted to it. The organization of her Theosophical Society was an outgrowth of spiritualism which at first she considered as coming from the lower regions. In 1879 Blavatsky and Olcott sailed for India and set up headquarters in Adyar. However, when she discovered Hinduism and Buddhism, she became fascinated with them and began to believe in the teachings and the spiritual manifestations of the masters who could reveal mysteries and knowledge. An altar was set up and soon messages and letters from the spirit world began to arrive. The doctrine of rebirths was revealed to her through this new avenue of spiritualism, and her theosophy accepted these high vibrations, also adopting some of the yoga and meditations. From one of her works comes the following. We stand bewildered before the mystery of our own making, and the riddle of life that we will not solve, and then accuse the great Sphinx of devouring us. But verily, there is not an accident in our lives, not a misshapen day or a misfortune, that could not be traced back to our own doings in this or in another life. The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky. A scandal arose concerning an ancient document she claimed to have discovered. Soon it was revealed that the document was a forgery, the work of Helena herself, and she left India never to return. This charge followed her for nearly 20 years. After Madame Blavatsky settled in London in 1887, she became acquainted with Annie Besant, who became a close colleague. In 1891 Madame Blavatsky died and Annie Besant's career was launched forward when she succeeded Blavatsky as head of the society. Through her efforts it became a worldwide organization. The Theosophical Society in America was started in New York City under the direction of William Q. Judge. From the beginning there was resentment at the control of the American Theosophical Society from India. Both Judge and Annie Besant hoped to take over the control of the society. However, when Besant spoke to overflow crowds at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, she won fame and recognition, which didn't help Judge's hopes for control of the society. Judge later claimed that Besant was under the control of dark forces, and in 1895 he declared if Theosophists choose still to believe in the existence and power of their Mahatmas, that is their business. It has also become the business of many spiritualists and New Age churches throughout the country. Reincarnation for the Millions, page 51. 2. Church Universal and Triumphant, Elizabeth Clare Prophet. In 1958 the Church Universal and Triumphant was started in Washington, D.C. by Mark L. Prophet, under the direction of the spirit of the Ascended Master El Morya. These masters, who are immortal, God-free beings, initiated the publication of their teachings to tell others how they victoriously passed all of their tests and trials on earth through reincarnation, or a round of rebirths. El Moryu was first contacted by Helena Blavatsky, and is considered to be the chief of the Darjeeling Council of their brotherhood. In 1966 their headquarters moved to Colorado Springs, where publishing continued. Their Montessori school was established in 1970, promoting bilingual education for the children of the Keepers of the Flame group, which eventually grew to a full elementary and high school program. Their Summit University was founded in Santa Barbara in 1971 to provide more intensive teachings of the Ascended Master of the Keepers of the Flame, and the students go through intensive 12-week summer sessions. In 1973 Mark Prophet died, but his wife Elizabeth assumed full leadership of the organization, which added groups throughout the United States, Canada, Europe, Australia, Philippines, and Africa. Elizabeth Clare Prophet, perhaps today's most successful and recognized reincarnationist, claims her authority came from the Savior himself. The vision of the church was given to me as I saw beloved Jesus the Christ in heaven, standing at the altar of a mighty cathedral. And Jesus revealed to me that it was time for that church. And so Jesus appointed me to inaugurate this church, and he placed upon me the mantle of the Vicar of Christ, which means simply the representative of Christ. Mother Mary was the head of the church when Jesus left. The Great White Brotherhood, Prophet, page 295. In 1974 the Church Universal and Triumphant was incorporated, and the Summit Lighthouse remained the publishing arm of the group. In 1976 the headquarters moved to Pasadena, California, and 2 years later to Malibu, California. The international headquarters moved in 1986 to a 33,000-acre Royal Teton Ranch just north of Yellowstone Park in Montana. They are advocates of organic farming, ranching, and a self-sufficient spiritual community. This group has combined the Judeo-Christian religions with those of the Far East. They believe that human beings are conceived in the mind of God and are born as manifestations of the duality of God, and that the I Am Presence is the central sun around which the individual evolves. According to church teachings, the goal of life for the soul evolving through numerous incarnations is to purify him/herself and to become one with Christ while in physical embodiment. The masters teach the science of the spoken word, i.e., the use of prayers, mantras, and decrees to call forth light, as the key whereby the soul can achieve this goal. Enk. Avema. Religions, page 1150. The number of members in this church is not available because it is against their policy to publicly give out such information. However, during a visit to their ranch and publishing house, the author learned that the ranch provides work for nearly 700 people, and their printing establishment in Livingston, Montana, involves over 124 members. It is interesting to compare the complicated and bewildering teachings of Elizabeth Clare Prophet to the clear and simple communications from the prophet Joseph Smith. The latter said, "I never design to communicate my ideas, but what are simple, for to this end I am sent." DHC 5:529. He also said, "I do not calculate or intend to please your ears with superfluity of words, or oratory, or with much learning, but I calculate to edify you with the simple truths from heaven." JD 6:1. He advised others to do the same. "It will be well to study plainness and simplicity in whatever you publish." FOR, my soul delighteth in plainness. TPJS, page 164. Brigham Young testified that Brother Joseph succeeded in his goal. "When I saw Joseph Smith, he took heaven, figuratively speaking, and brought it down to earth, and he took the earth, brought it up, and opened up, in plainness and simplicity, the things of God, and that is the beauty of his mission." JD 5:332. Both the Bible and Book of Mormon are records that teach history and the gospel in relative simplicity. W. Phelps testifies, "The Book of Mormon is just what it was when it first came forth, a revelation from the Lord. The knowledge it contains is desirable, the doctrine it teaches is from the blessed Savior, its precepts are good, its principles righteous, its judgments just, its style simple, and its language plain, so that a wayfaring man, though a fool, need not err therein." Messenger and Advocate, September 1835, page 178. "The Lord revealed to Joseph Smith that if something is not right, it will leave you with a stupor of thought." D&C 9:9, which is what most people would experience after reading the following statement by Elizabeth C. Prophet. On the 4 o'clock line under the hierarchy of Taurus is God Obedience, the ascended Master Godfrey, whose mastery of the flame of obedience makes him eminently qualified to deliver to us the flame of God Obedience, and to give us the initiations of love under the hierarchy of Taurus. The 7 mighty Elohim serve with Godfrey to train millions of life streams in the law of conformity to the inner blueprint. Beloved El Morya holds the position in Gemini on the 5 o'clock line, governing the energies of God wisdom and testing us, with the reinforcement of the legions of Mercury, in those twin flames of Gemini, the Alpha-Omega cycle which comes through on that 5 o'clock line. Serapis Bey, hierarch of the Ascension Temple, working diligently with the great Seraphim and Cherubim, initiates us in the white fire core of the Mother, the flame of purity which we call God Harmony. To master the mother flame on the 6 o'clock line, we must master the flow of harmony. We must be able to hold the reins of harmony in our 4 lower bodies. This is not an easy testing, inasmuch as it is a testing of the water element, of the energy in motion. It requires that we certainly an important key in determining the truthfulness of a principle or doctrine should be its clarity and simplicity. 3. The Rosicrucians. The ideals and teachings of the Far East also found representatives in the West through Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. A revival was experienced in the 19th century through the formation of several Rosicrucian groups, the first of which was begun by and named after a Christian called Rosenkreutz, who learned these teachings during his travels in the Near East. Rosicrucians derive their traditional conceptions from the mystics of Egypt, however, they have adopted some from Theosophy, Freemasonry, and modern parapsychology. Other fraternities evolved early in the 17th century, such as the Illuminati, founded in 1676 by Adam Weishaupt. In 1670 Abd Villiers published a book entitled Mysteries of the Kabbalists and Rosicrucians, which the Rosicrucians violently opposed. Later Villiers was murdered, some claiming that the Rosicrucians were responsible. The Rosicrucian lodges grew in numbers during the 19th century, but unfortunately some were bent on fraud. Also about this time the Freemasons added a Rosicrucian degree to their initiations, and the Rosicrucians became greatly influenced by the Freemasons. In 1865 a Masonic order of Rosicrucians was founded in London by Robert Wentworth Wright Little. The history of Rosicrucians in the United States dates to 1694 with the chapter of perfection in Germantown, Pennsylvania, some of their teachings coming from the Kabbalah and German occult teachers. The modern Rosicrucian teachings are like those of the Theosophists and Freemasons with a form of Christian Gnosticism and mysticism incorporated. Transmutations, psychic powers, meditations, and yoga teachings are all included. 4. Alice Bailey and the New Moon. Alice Bailey, 1880–1949, at first joined with the Theosophy practitioners, but later claimed that Mrs. Besant was using an autocratic demand upon her subjects, so Alice began her own work of transmissions. During her lifetime, she wrote 21 books on her observations, which often included meditations and contemplations in the full moon, and also founded the Arcane School. After Alice's death in 1949, the movement splintered. 5. Guy Ballard's I Am Order. Guy W. Ballard, 1878–1939, began an interesting group of mystic and occult followers, leading them into the theosophical teachings of the I Am movement. This occult metaphysical group based Ballard's claims on an appearance of a personage who called himself Omnipotent Life, who taught him about cause and effect, abundant supply, and reincarnation. This personage then changed into the mystical figure of Saint Germain, the 17th century occultist who had become one of the ascended masters. This Saint Germain described his mission as one of instigating the 7th Golden Age, or the Age of eternal perfection on earth. He said he had hunted unsuccessfully all over Europe for someone strong enough and faithful enough to do the work, but failing there, he came to America and found Ballard. In 1932 Ballard began to release the message of Saint Germain and other spiritual beings who had become ascended masters. By 1939, at the death of Ballard, over 1 million people were members of this group. During its history, the I Am group underwent several setbacks, i.e., a former student, Gerald B. Bryan, wrote a series of books against them, and other former members also brought up charges that the Ballards were teaching a false religion. All of this resulted in an indictment against them for mail fraud through misrepresentations and false promises. The hostile press caused many students to leave during the ensuing 8-year legal battle, eventually resulting in the rebuilding and formation of new organizations. The headquarters for the main group is in Schaumburg, Illinois. They now have 300 centers throughout the United States. 6. The Joy Foundation. The Joy Foundation was founded in Santa Barbara in 1977 by Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Huffer, who has concentrated on astrology, metaphysics, psychology, and the occult. Some of their teachings correspond with the iron groups, including the rays of light teachings of the Masters. They describe their spiritual hierarchy as lords who have lived many lifetimes and become the ascended Masters. 7. Morningland Church of the Ascended Christ. This church was founded by Daniel Sperato in Long Beach, California, in 1973. Sperato claimed to have experienced a Vesha or divine incarnation of the ascended master Donato into his body and became the true personification of the oneness. His doctrinal teachings are based on the Holy Scriptures, ecumenical creeds, Holy Apostolic Tradition, United Lodge of Theosophists, Sanctuary of the Master's Presence, and the list goes on and on. It can truthfully be said that when men depart, even minutely, from the simple teachings of Christ's gospel, they begin to wander into and accept all sorts of strange, unusual and mystical teachings. Transmigration and reincarnation seem to always be a part of those bewildering theosophical speculations. Christ commanded his apostles to go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, Mark 16:15, but down through the centuries, just the reverse has taken place. Those creatures who were supposed to receive the gospel have instead taught the messengers the philosophies of men-among, which is their belief in reincarnation.